Nau mai hoki mai ki other fold e mihi nei ko Duncan Grieve talking wa. My guests this week are Carl von Rando and Gemma Gracewood, respectively the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Letterboxd, which is it's a few different things. It's kind of partly a social media site, it's partly a community hub, it's partly a sort of a giant nest of sort of user-sourced reviews of film in all its complexity and glory. It was founded in Auckland like a while ago, in the era of Facebook and Twitter, 13 years or so ago, and it's had it's basically tortoised its way to becoming an incredibly important part of film's infrastructure. And I say tortoise in a very admiring way, because I think that and Carl talks about this in a really interesting way on the podcast, is that this thing grew out of their day jobs, which is basically a software development studio, and they just wanted to have something of their own to work on, and Letterboxd was what it was, and they picked film because they liked film, but they didn't take venture capital, and therefore the shareholders' expectations of a return were relatively limited, and certainly not rapacious, or they weren't expecting the thing to just go 10x and fly to the moon in short order. And as a result, you can see a very kind of careful, deliberate, audience-centric development that has happened to Letterboxd, which stands in quite a stark contrast to the sort of the chaotic, scale-chasing approach that the meta social companies have gone for. And obviously it's helped by the fact that it is deliberately narrow in its focus on film and its focus on reviews and so on. But it's just a really, really interesting company. But this isn't Business is Boring, this is The Fold. So I wanted to basically use it as a window to talk about the state of film and to talk about the way that community, culture, business, the way that all those things can fit together, and particularly, and this is where Gemma Gracewood comes in, the sort of editorial layer and how that interacts with both the sort of data that is generated by the business, but also the sort of, by the sounds of it, very kind of beautifully cared for and curated and cultivated culture that comes from the community. Gosh, that's a lot of C's. Anyway, this is one of my favorite episodes in quite a while. They're such an interesting duo. It's such a fascinating company in so many different ways. I think anyone who is listening to this podcast is going to get something out of this, because there's just such a huge amount in it. So yeah, this is Carl von Rando and Gemma Gracewood from Letterboxd on The Fold. Kia ora, Gemma and Carl. Welcome to The Fold.
Kia ora, Duncan.
Kia ora, Duncan. Thank you.
So let's start with where it starts. Like, how does Letterboxd? Because it's a venerable institution, in technology terms. Tell me how it came into the world.
Oh my goodness! Back in 2010, 2011. Matthew, co-founder, and I were busy working for clients and decided we wanted to do a bit of work for ourselves as well. And we'd always been interested in film. We had a short film website back before YouTube was a thing. And we were collecting little DV tapes from people and digitizing them and putting them online so people could watch film online in a tiny little window. But we sort of stopped doing that, and we wanted to have our own project. We both collected DVDs. And we had this, Matt had this idea of saying, let's give people a way to express their DVD collection initially. And then, that idea had been bubbling actually for a few years. And then it sort of turned into going, well, let's do something with social around this, looking at IMDb and saying, IMDb is the home of this, like Google Plus was the home of, but there's no social there, and thought we could do a good job of social, and so in that sort of 9 months of 2011, we put it all together in our studio and launched.
It's interesting, right? Like, because there's a big idea of what has made social. It's almost like a truism, is that you need enormous scale and ambition to make it work, whereas this is narrow but incredibly fervently felt as sort of what it feels like. Were you sort of always confident that you could break one of those rules of social? Were they not particularly written at the time and to the extent that they are now?
I think at the time, Facebook and Twitter were unassailable. There was no one was going to compete in those areas, and so we weren't trying to compete in those areas. We were just trying to be a place where people could come and discuss their enjoyment of film. And so we were also really lucky not to be taking venture investment from it. So we didn't have someone breathing down our necks saying 18 months runway, like all of this sort of stuff. So we were able just to take it bit by bit and attract people who were interested in being part of that community. And then it grew to where we are today.
So in terms of community, maybe you can speak to this, Gemma. Like, were you a sort of a member before you were a staffer? And it does feel like that there's a lot of people say this kind of thing, but some companies actually live it. That the relationship with their community is the most important thing that they have. How was the community in the early days, and how did it develop?
Starting with the last thing you said around community being the most important thing, I would say that 99% of the content on Letterboxd is created by our community. The lists, the logs, the ratings, the reviews. So they are the heart of Letterboxd. So yeah, you're absolutely right. We are one of those companies that says community is the most important thing, because it literally is. And we do a lot of work and a lot of thinking around everything to do with our, moderating tools, our community policy, all of the ways in which we ask people how to be on Letterboxd. And that's sort of built on a way of being on Letterboxd that was established right at the beginning. I've been a member since Matthew Buchanan sent an email out to me and various other friends in the Aotearoa film industry saying, we made a thing, can you please join it so that we've got some people in our beta so that it looks like there's a community. So it's really interesting because as opposed to other social networks around the world, what you've got is a bunch of New Zealanders who know each other as the foundation of an online global community. So you can imagine what kind of, I guess, principles and values come with that.
Are they still like power users of the site? Like, is there a kind of, even though obviously it's grown pretty enormous, particularly in the last few years, which we'll get to, is there still some kind of connective tissue that keeps those early people?
Shout out Jacob Bunny, Sasha Judd, Tom Augustine. Yeah, there's a whole lot of people from day one still 12 years on getting amongst it.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I mean, in terms of, I just belatedly, embarrassingly realised that I haven't actually got you to describe its nature, which is inherently something that evolves. But maybe can one of you just kind of pick a way of describing how you conceive of it and how the audience might?
How to think about what Letterboxd is?
Yeah.
Oof. Well, we've described it in all kinds of ways. We described it as originally Goodreads for film, when Goodreads was really in people's minds. Letterboxd is a lot of things for a lot of people. It's a film club. It's where people come together to talk about and recommend each other films. It's a film diary, so you can keep track of what you've seen. We've just had the New Zealand International Film Festival. If you've gone to more than 2 films, you need help remembering what they were. Yeah, I always live in fear of someone asking me what was the last film I watched. But now I know I can always
it's in your pocket.
Find out. Yeah,
it's right there in your pocket. So I think a social network for film lovers is a pretty basic way of referring to it. You don't have to have an account to look on Letterboxd is the first thing. Quite similar to Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb, you can dial up a film and see what the average Letterboxd rating of that film is and read sort of the front page of popular reviews. If you do have an account, you can then, as Carl said, log every movie you've seen, review those films, rate them anywhere from 0.5 a star out of 5 to 5 stars out of 5. You can add them to lists. You can have a conversation with Duncan Grieve, who goes, Gemma, you really should see the Fire Festival documentary. It's amazing. And I'm like, I really should. I'm going to put it on my watch list. And then if I've told Letterboxd what streaming services I'm signed up to, then when that doc comes on Prime Video, for example, I'll get an email from Letterboxd saying, hey, that Fire Festival film that Duncan Grieve really wants you to watch is now on Amazon Prime. You can watch it today. So there's a whole lot of different ways in which it works. That's the real basic, classic film user way. A lot of film industry members use it for creating mood boards. I think one of the things I would say is the absolute stroke of genius that Carl and Matthew executed at the very beginning was building the design around film posters. So it's beautiful to look at. Your producer is nodding. He's a power user. Hey, Sam. And so what it means is if you curate a list of films, you've got a gorgeous visual right there. So if you're a filmmaker who's thinking about what your poster might look like, and you pull in a whole bunch of comp titles, and then you've got this gorgeous mood board that you can hand over to your designer. So that's one way that industry members might use it. Another is purely for research. I know that Bowen Yang has got a list on there at the moment of Asian crime movies, and I'm like, I cannot wait to see a Bowen Yang written Asian crime movie. So there's lots of different ways to use it.
And what we differentiate from sites like Rotten Tomatoes is when you come to see these reviews about films, these are reviews from people just like you. We describe that as the grassroots film reviews. And when you follow people on the site, when you like their reviews, then when you're coming to research a film, trying to work out if you should see it, you're reading what your friends and your Letterboxd friends thought about the film. So you're getting a really good sense of what it is you're adding to your watch list.
It's interesting. So before you talked about it as a sort of a Goodreads for film in some respects, and Goodreads has had its share of drama effectively with its community, sort of review bombing of even unreleased titles. There is complexity to this stuff, no matter how much you try and make it a peaceable place. Have you experienced, it sort of feels inevitable that you might have experienced your own. Do you want to kind of speak to how you have gotten the place to be a community that works, which is what it feels like from the outside, rather than one that is just kind of ferociously attacking itself?
We don't have a large team of moderators. We have a small team of moderators. We have built a lot of technology to help moderators, but I think some of the key elements of why it works on Letterboxd, one of those is our DNA. We started with this beta group. We started with a group, first of all, of sort of friends and then friends of friends. It was a invitation-based beta. Matthew went to Brooklyn and announced it at a conference
called Brooklyn Beta
of cool people. And so we had a really cool audience on at the beginning. We had people who wrote really thoughtful things about films, and that kind of DNA has persisted, where it hasn't been a site for shit posting. We've also, when we don't have a public forum on the site where you can come along and just say, what does everyone think about X? Whatever you're posting on the site is in your channel, and it's a review of a film. And so I think that also contributes a lot to people not bringing other random things onto our platform, that usually the discussion is about film. Film is inherently subjective. And so there's a lot of room for very hospitable, very kind disagreement. And where there isn't, then we have blocking and reporting and moderation and banning and all these other things that we use judiciously to keep things happy.
Yeah, we definitely do our reading of, I guess, the room, the global room. So we know if something's going to go down. We know if, Zack Snyder's Justice League is coming, and we can prepare as a team for that. Sometimes we get completely blindsided. I'm going to give the obvious example, a beautiful first-time French filmmaker, film called Cuties. I don't know if you remember that.
I know that, the controversy.
Yeah, so it landed on Netflix, America with a poster chosen by the American marketing team that really out of context sexualized the young women in the film. And wow, the Pizzagate people went to town on it, and they came to Letterboxd as well to 1-star that film. And it's like it was completely blindsided. So the job is to then immediately go and watch the film to get context. That's what I would do and what I did do, and was like, wow, this is a beautiful film by a black French female filmmaker that is just walked itself into the middle of the American social maelstrom. And then we talk as a team about what to do and how to deal with that. I mean, I would say the rating is still a bit low, but it's definitely higher than what it would have been if we hadn't intervened.
So with that intervention, that was essentially a bespoke thing for a scenario that reared up out of a clear blue sky.
Yeah.
And you're comfortable with that? The team's small enough and the company's culture is robust enough to be able to just deal with things on a more ad hoc basis? Yeah,
absolutely. And to have that conversation and to go, okay, well, what is this actually about? This is bigger than Letterboxd, and this is bigger than this film. This is about other things. And to then build, what Carl's really amazing at is, we'll have the long, extremely passionate, lots and lots of emotional labour meetings about what it all means, and then turn to Carl and he'll go, oh, so you need a tool for this to make your jobs easier and to, cut out the last 5 days of deep mental load. And we're like, yes, please. And he'll think up a tool for that.
We've got an amazing team in that respect, haven't we? Is that, because we're a small team and we've got Gemma who's able to go and who's going to watch the film and understanding the context. Everyone in our team loves this industry and understands it and is thinking about it all the time. So we can make a decision really quickly that we want to act. And then we do develop solutions if it is a software solution. Like if it's a solution where we need to say, this film hasn't been released yet, so we haven't thought about this before, but we're not going to show the ratings histogram because this is going to discourage people from coming in to give it a bad rating before it's even been released. Yeah. And so we often try to come up with sort of clever solutions to that. But we also have to then say, well, if people are going to rate half stars, we need to try and now start to evaluate the quality of accounts, which ratings are legitimate. We've got a goal of having a rating on our site which is representative for our community, and it's useful for our community. It's not useful if we know that a whole lot of people thought it was a fun idea to come and rate it.
Or signed up to Letterboxd specifically to just rate that film. Yeah, so we can do things like that, track history and go, obviously there's 10,000 new members today who have all just rated one film 1 star. That stuff's easy to figure out on a technology basis.
Yeah, our development team is able to add a fun Easter egg in a day and to add a correction or mitigation for an attack in that same day. Yeah. So we're pretty lucky.
It's sort of interesting hearing the peer review talk, a technologist and someone from editorial background, and the kind of ease with which you go back and forth. Like even the idea of a technology company sending along and having an editor-in-chief is interesting in itself. Like, how does that sort of those two kind of cultures inform the internal and community culture of Letterboxd, do you think?
I think it's fun. I think it's fun to talk about how I came along in the first place, and it was
do that.
One of Aunt Timpson's annual Christmas barbecues. Caught up with Matthew, who I'd known since the 90s when Nigel Horrocks, who was on the board of 95 BFM, where I was the editorial director, walked a young Matthew Buchanan in the door to build BFM's very first website. And being the editorial director, technology was walked in the door and handed over to editorial to put, words and code together. So that's where we developed a friendship. And cut 2 years later, I've been a beta member and early member of Letterboxd, kind of using it a little bit, living in New York at this point, home for the summer, chatting with Matthew, and I'm like, I follow you guys on I follow you guys on Twitter, and all you really tweet about is Letterboxd is down. Oh, it's up again. We broke this bit. Oh, we fixed it again. I was like, are you going to talk about movies at some point?
I love this conversation.
No, it's like you need someone on your team who is talking to your community about the thing that you built this technology for.
Light bulb moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was no one already in our team to do that.
No.
So there was no one doing it.
Yeah. And at that time, I was doing a whole bunch of cobbling together some different contracts in order to afford groceries in New York City. And one of those was I was the social media strategist for New Zealand On Screen. And so I was already tweeting about movies and TV. And so cut to a few months later and Matthew sent me a gentle email going, hey, you know that conversation, should we do something about that? Have you got any hours in your day, in your week to come on board and tweet about movies? And so that was really where it started. And I guess that's the perfect example of how those two things come together as a team. But it's, we've got a pretty active Slack. We've got a channel called Platform where anyone on the team who is on the, content or editorial side can go, hey, I wish when I do my lists, it could do this. And, and the devs listen to that and have a chat and go, yeah, we can do that today for you.
Yeah, that's right. If they get excited about the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We just didn't think of it before. Yeah, that's really true.
Yeah. And it's interesting to think, I don't really think about us as a technology company. We're
what are we?
We're a community social company. We're a film company. This technology is just supporting what we do. And while the technology enables us to do it well, then it's working. Then it's working well. And again, with an amazing team, we've been able to no longer have to tweet that much about Letterboxd being down. We were down nearly a whole Christmas because Christmas was the time that I chose to do serious infrastructure upgrades because that was when I had enough time off to do the upgrades.
Fun fact, Duncan. Fun fact: Christmas, if you ever get a chance to look in our back end, is also the time of year that everybody logs the most films, that the most new members sign up.
Not that year. No, I think it still was. I learned a lot.
So how did, so you're a social film company that is using social media to log outages. How did the culture and the relationship with the community change when you brought Gemma on and started to build out the idea of editorial and into the team?
I think that's, as I said, we don't have kind of a general chit-chat space on Letterboxd. Letterboxd is about films. And so I think adding Twitter, originally gave us that sort of area to have general chit-chat and interaction with people. We started doing a newsletter after that as well. And sort of all of that was...
And there was an occasional blog that was hosted on Tumblr.
Yeah, with a theme and everything. Yeah. It wasn't cheap.
Yeah.
But this was around this idea of starting to build community. Because while Letterboxd itself, the website's a community, much like Twitter, actually, how it was. It really depends on who you follow, and so if you follow, there are so many sub communities on Letterboxd that everyone's experience was different. So we wanted to also give this experience of being part of this one film club, and that newsletter was very much, this is a club newsletter. This is what's going on in your club, what's going on your website, and what's going on in your app.
And I think a big part of it for me and for the team now is about going, there are millions of people you could follow on Letterboxd all day, every day, and you can't possibly in your activity feed get through all of the good reviews. And so it's our job, curatorially, if that's a word, to find the good reviews and elevate them and show them to other members, and then you can find new people to follow in that way. Also to sort of contextualize, again, a film that might be landing a bit differently by going through, and I mean, we're talking about what's the most popular movie on Letterboxd right now. It's not Barbie or Oppenheimer, it's red, white and royal blue, and going through those reviews and looking at what queer Letterboxd has to say about it versus straight Letterboxd, I think is really informative for how this works as a rom-com. And so we do things like that, where we dig right into a film, like by filtering by who's giving it 5 stars and why, who's giving it 1 star and why, figuring all that stuff out. And yeah, that's part of what we do. I think in terms of speaking with and building community as well, a big part of it is, it can't be underestimated what our data tells us in terms of everything from our ratings to how many people logged a film in a single day. We get a lot of our news from our own data. It's one of my favourite things to do is find news from inside Letterboxd rather than reflect what's happening outside. And it's always good to break your own news, isn't it? So we're looking ahead to Halloween at the moment and going, what are the most obsessively rewatched, where we have defined obsessive rewatches as having logged a film 5 or more times. Not 2 or more, 5 or more. Like, that's getting obsessive.
That's a big number.
It's a big number. What are the most obsessively rewatched horror films? So to build a really interesting picture of not what are the highest rated, but what are the ones that people return to again and again, and then dig into the reviews and go, why is that? And what are our members' reviews telling us about what makes this rewatchable? And then to run the numbers again where the film has had fewer than 3,000 people log it. So then we get the most underseen, obsessively rewatched horror films. And that's just horror. And that's just one metric. But we can look at so much stuff across Letterboxd in terms of the way our community is using it and then reflect that back to them. And then that just kind of keeps building community and building a sense of a global film family.
Yeah, people like to know who they are or who they're in cahoots with. Our stats at the end of the year is such a massive part of the website. Like, we just get so much interest and attention in that each year, and that's basically when our community comes together and says, who are we? Who were we this year? What did we love to watch? And we pull out the ones that are right at the top, but we also pull out interesting things that aren't right at the top so that we can spread that love a little further.
Well, I mean, even as you talk, about the data of this thing and about the culture that's developed, it strikes me that there's a sort of maybe an incongruity or something. Like, basically the general top line story of what is happening to film is broadly people aren't that stoked. Like the rise of franchises, the rise of streaming, the sort of pandemic obviously didn't help. There's all these kind of writers and actors strikes and so on. There's just a lot of kind of gloom that sort of feels like it sits in the air, and yet you have this culture that sounds like it's growing and flourishing, and all the beautiful things that we used to know about film that it's still happening here. What is your relationship with that sort of industrial community like, and do they sort of learn things from how people are, I'm talking about even at like a producer or a funder kind of level. Do they sort of, are there any of them sort of going, actually, there are lessons here that might help to revive some aspects of this industry that feel a little bit tired or moribund or something?
Yeah, I would hope so, and also have some actual real-world examples. There are cinemas around the world that program letterboxed seasons of revival films. Prince Charles Cinema in London, for one. The Nighthawk in Brooklyn, for one, where they've taken a letterbox list like Be Gay, Do Crime and programmed a season of those films, which I think is so cool. Or actually, speaking of using our community data, one of the coolest things that happened was we did a story around, we called it the 50 Highest Risers. Dom Corrie, one of our writers, wrote a story. We got the data on the films over the lifetime of Letterboxd whose rating has risen the most over time. And it's things like the Hannah Montana musical, but it's also things like a very, very cool film called Bones, starring Snoop Dogg. So wrote this great story about these films that have essentially been kind of reconsidered over. Jennifer's Body is another great one, reconsidered over time, having had a terrible marketing campaign first time round. Wrote this story, and then the cinema in London programmed a season of these films, because the evidence is, there are film lovers in the world who adore these films and rate them highly.
And maybe never got to see them.
And maybe never got
first
to see them
round
the first time round on the big screen because they were marketed so badly. And yeah, I mean, that's just so thrilling to me, because that's a perfect, and that season was sort of just post-pandemic, getting people back into cinemas as well. So that's definitely one thing that's happening a lot. We do work a lot with the industry. We work with every studio from A24 and Neon to Sony, Columbia Pictures, Warner Brothers. We do member screenings where we will isolate, for example, members in LA who have seen every Todd Field or Kate Blanchett film and rated them 4 stars and above, and we invite them to a word-of-mouth sneak screening of Tar, for example. And so we've got the geography, we've got the ratings, we've got the preferences around stars and directors. You're shaking your head in wonder? Or
in wonder.
Like, yeah, it's amazing, right? And so the thing that I find really telling about our community is that the turnout rate for those screenings is high. It's 75% and above, where publicists have been telling us that post-pandemic RSVPs, they've been wanting to invite 300% more people than they have seats in the cinema for, and they've been getting a 30% turnout rate. Yeah. And so we've got this active community who actively want to go back to the cinema. And we, but are also buying Blu-rays, that like every time. So Aaron Yap is our head of social now, because, at a certain point you have to admit your weaknesses, and tweeting about movies, is no longer one of my strengths. It is, there's TikTok, there's Instagram, there's, Threads, there's YouTube Shorts, there's so many more channels. We need more hands on that tiller. So Aaron Yap, who's here in Auckland, is now a head of social. He's built a really great small team underneath him.
And it's reflecting the feelings of our community, reflecting and enhancing, right?
Yeah.
And just kind of growing that. It's such a win-win for us. Our members are so, when we send a promotional email to someone, we're inviting them to go and see a film in their city. Like they can't open it fast enough. A friend of mine in Minnesota said, I got an email from you that I couldn't go, but this was so exciting. I was like, dude, that was an ad.
Get a hold of yourself.
Yeah, get a hold of yourself. I know what I was going to say about Aaron. The social team, every time we do a prompt that's like, and we do this a few times a year, show us your shelves. Oh man, the nerdery in this world around the exact construction of shelves to hold Blu-ray and box set collections is incredible. And yeah,
That's why we don't need to worry about being technology nerds, because there are much bigger film nerds out there.
They can shade you. So you're talking about this sort of struggle to get people back into cinemas post-pandemic, which is a very real and ongoing phenomenon, Barbenheimer notwithstanding. Paradoxically, the pandemic was incredible for you. I've got the data here that says that your membership went up from 1.3 million at the beginning of 2020 to 10 million now. How did that happen and feel, and what did it do to Letterboxd?
Goodness me. I think we were just so pleased to still be working and, safe that, that this all just sort of happened. It was all hands on deck getting it going. Gemma came on full time, as she said. In that time, our lead developer David Mapleston came on full time. In that time, we felt, we did look at each other and say, "Is this a good idea to bring on our first 2 full time members of the team now?" But it was.
So this is March 2020.
Yeah, March or April.
And did you just see something happening? Like everyone's inside and...
Oh, I knew what was happening in January. My brother, who was working on a very, very big airline campaign, texted the family and said, so the campaign's being shelved and they're currently trying to figure out where to park the 747s. I would get ready if I were you. And that was about the point where I was like, yeah, Matt, Carl, I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to go full time. Yeah. They've been basically saying,
we're like, why?
What's changed? What's going on? I mean, because I'm a producer and I love making things with people, which is part of the reason I love being in this realm of essentially promoting other people's things that they've made with people. And they're expensive things to make, right? And no one's in it for charity. But 2019, I'd gone to the Toronto International Film Festival for the first time as Letterboxd's representative.
Probably with your own credit card.
Yeah, with my own credit card.
We'll pay you back, don't worry.
Man, that was crazy. But I'd only flown from New York, so it was a short. This is the point. It's sort of there was a tyranny of distance leading up to the pandemic, and that's partly what changed for us in the pandemic. Is that so? I had the privilege of living in New York at that time. Popped up to Toronto, ran around like all by myself, going, "Has anyone heard of Letterboxd?" And really just trying to suss out how our brand was perceived. More by filmmakers in the industry, because we knew how it was perceived by our existing members. They loved it. But we didn't know if we were relevant to the industry and if it was something that we could kind of build build relationships and actually build business on. And that was the year that Jojo Rabbit premiered, so I knew that I had access to at least one good red carpet through our old friend Tykes. But it was also Parasite year. And so Parasite had been at Cannes, Bong Joon-ho had come to Toronto. I got on that red carpet. It was me and like 5 members of the Korean media all speaking perfect Korean and me just going, floundering. And I just kind of yelled one kind of question at him as he walked past saying, it's not just the most highly rated film of the year, it's the most highly rated film of all time. And he turned on his heel, director Bong, and came back and went, thank you very much. It just gave us the perfect soundbite. And I was like, boom, that's it. We're through. We've somehow broken through the door that we needed to break through. And the tricky thing, though, was, so I did that, and then Matthew went on a bit of a office tour of studios in December of the same year. And then, we're back in New Zealand, and it's like, how do you keep building business? How do you keep building these connections when you're stuck in Tamaki Makaurau and the industry is over there? Pandemic, everybody has to stay home. Suddenly, all the studio meetings are online, on Zoom. All of these people that, like, if I'm popping through LA for 3 days, I'm like, I'm going to be in LA on my way home to New Zealand for 3 days. Can I meet with you? Oh, I'm out of town. That's what was happening to us. Suddenly, everyone's home, and most importantly, Cactus Lab, which is Letterboxd's, founder studio, had since inception been working on a very hybrid office home, extremely family friendly, values based system. So we were already used to working from home, whereas a lot of these other people weren't. And so it was like, right, got you where I want you. And we started being able to have meetings for the first time with people we'd struggled to get through the door with and building relationships with these people. Yeah.
And I guess because and that's a sort of a backdrop, but was there a chicken or the egg thing? Like, was it a bunch of people being home just helped accelerate growth, or was it these connections?
It was both. It was both at the same time. I think that I know that people at home were looking for ways to, discern Monday from Tuesday.
Yeah.
And tracking apps were that way, tracking your walks, tracking your
and there's just an order from chaos thing about I can put this thing together in this digital space in this area while outside is all chaos.
And people were just watching a lot more films and
but
wanting
also
to share it with their friends.
Having film clubs, like setting up film clubs with friends and family.
You'd watch online, right? And you'd sort of have a watch along. You go, let's all press play at the same time.
Yeah, we did a Paddington watch along. But also, like Anish Chaganti, who's a filmmaker, he made a film called Run and a film called Searching, was living with about 4 other people. And, we started our podcast in lockdown because what else were we going to do? And when I talked to him, he said, we use Letterboxd every single week to build out our flat film club. And so lots of people were doing that kind of thing. And then there were a lot of cinephiles, I guess film lovers, who were going, this is the time to dive into a filmography. I'm going to watch every single Scorsese film in chronological order and share my thoughts about it. Yeah.
In terms of the sort of a pinch yourself moment when you realise that you've arrived, like the, because, for example, last year when Margot Robbie's account was discovered, and you can see like a vulture headline that just has Letterboxd and it doesn't explain what it is, it just assumes that you know. Like, do you want to talk about that incident?
Those, yeah.
And when you sort of kind of feel like you no longer have to explain yourself, that must be just an incredible sense of achievement and validation.
Sort of happens slowly over time, doesn't it? We had who was it on that late night talk show who mentioned Letterboxd, but it was just in passing.
The star of 8th grade.
Yeah.
Elsie.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So we had a series of little mentions like that, and we sort of noticed every single one of them. And over the last year, it's just become so common you don't notice anymore.
Then we were in Scream 6, I think.
That was a highlight. I still
funny.
haven't seen it. Too scary.
Yeah. Pinch me moment. I think for me it was when I was at a Women in Film and Television event here during the pandemic, and someone across the room who is now a really good friend in the industry said, "Who is she?" Like, we were both asking questions of New Zealand on air, and afterwards it's like, "Who are you?" "Oh, I'm blah, blah, blah." "Who are you?" "I work for this weird thing called Letterboxd." And she just freaked out, jumped up and down, was like, "Let me follow you." It was the first time in this industry, in this country, that I didn't have to explain myself. Like, I was going to say being in the Oscars press room was a pinch me moment, but actually the moment where I didn't have to explain myself to a local in the film industry was a pinch me moment.
I feeling a little bit similar.
Yeah.
In-person things are now my thing as well.
Yeah.
I had someone, I was in the UK at a random fancy old house, who said, "Great hat."
And they just assumed you're a fan.
I don't know. I just said thank you and took my lunch.
For those listening at home, Carl's wearing a Letterboxd hat.
I thought this was on video. Yeah, but actually a highlight, walking to work in Grey Lynn, through Grey Lynn, someone goes past me the other day wearing a Letterboxd dad hat.
No.
I was not wearing my hat. I don't know what was going on.
And what did you say?
And I said, "Great hat." And then we just kept on walking because this is New Zealand.
That's beautiful. That's how we do it here. Almost out of time, but in terms of, I just wanted you to talk about Barbenheimer and how that sort of energy bomb coming at a time when it was sort of really needed and also weirdly couldn't be capitalized upon, like how that manifested and felt on the platform.
We certainly felt it in the server. There.
Right.
Yeah. Our David is sharing graphs in the morning going, "Oh, it's here." There's everything's like 20% higher.
What was the graph that was shared the other day? It looks like Batman. It was like the classic, January, December, January, Christmas spike. And then there's this other spike just as high in the middle of the year, and it looks like Batman's ears on his mask. It's so funny.
It was very unusual. We don't get a spike in the middle of the year usually.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
I mean, I don't know what to say about that. I felt really uncomfortable about Barbie and Oppenheimer being in the same conversation together, especially as someone from the South Pacific, where, I feel like it's funny, isn't it? The kind of nuance and the trauma get a bit lost. And I found myself hunting for the Letterboxd reviews that go there in terms of, nuclear fallout. And but in terms of getting people to the cinema, I mean, wild, so cool. We sent our London editor, Ella Kemp, out on Barbenheimer Day to see both films and to interview people at both screenings. And, we dove right into it, of course. It's exciting times to be at the movies. And what's really interesting is I was at Melbourne Film Festival last week and met a few filmmakers from around the world, and a Vietnamese filmmaker called Phan, who has a beautiful film coming out called Inside the Yellow Cocoon Shell, which won the Camera d'Or at Cannes. It's currently in Vietnamese cinemas, where Vietnamese cinemas are experiencing Cocoonheimer. So it's his beautiful 3-hour-long independent film and Oppenheimer, and people are going to both, which I just think's gorgeous.
That is gorgeous.
Yeah.
So just to finish up, it does feel, you said at the top that it's instructive that you don't have some venture capitalist looking for a 10x return, and that has helped drive community and engineering decisions that have kind of kept it kind of smaller and more deeply felt and beautiful as a result. But, there is something has happened here. You know things now about how to do this in a particular field. Is there any kind of, there doesn't seem to be a perfect equivalent in, say, music or in
Say it, TV.
Or TV. I mean, and I'm sure that border can feel more porous than hard at times. Do you? Is there plans, or have you contemplated kind of moving into adjacent cultural fields? Where are you going?
We've always joked about going into music.
Jukeboxed.
Yeah.
Have you got the domain? Be honest.
No, because we're not going to go into music. No. At least not yet. But we are looking very seriously at going into TV series, and that's been a piece of work that's been, or a consideration for 5 years, and it's taken us a really long time because we've got a beautiful thing with film, and just over time we've seen TV series become more and more similar to film, and the same kind of quality, and but maybe a bit easier to make, and that it's just a no-brainer for us to go there. So it's still a work in progress. We don't have anything to announce, but we're working really, really carefully to make sure that these two really similar but really different mediums can coexist.
Because Carl really needs somewhere to put his Survivor thoughts.
I've recorded them all, so as soon as I can, I'm going to be copying and pasting.
No, but it's interesting, isn't it? Because the conversation around TV online, has shifted as the way that series are served to us have shifted. Recap culture is not at the heights that it was in the 2010s. Sort of day and date Sunday night chats around Succession aren't happening. So there is a desire from people to find a place to.
Yeah, well, and it's also as the sort of social platforms that kind of helped distribute this content as they've decided that they want to take another path. It doesn't mean that the desire to have those connections and express them in written forms disappeared. It's just that the venue has kind of evicted them in a lot of ways. But
there's still so much to do even for film. Like, we don't have showtimes yet, and we absolutely should. If we're talking about saving cinema, then, film showtimes at your local cinema is the very next thing we should do.
And that's new revenue streams too,
Yeah, it's what, Sam in our office in Auckland is busy working on an integration at the moment. So, yeah, things are coming.
Beautiful. Well, I'll let you get back to building, but
saving cinema.
It's just a chill job. But
wait, Duncan, I've got a question for you.
For me?
What are your 4 favourite films?
Oh, you can't just spring that on someone.
It's what we do.
Oh, God.
It's right there at the top of your profile, Duncan.
Yeah, are you on Letterboxd?
I joined like about half an hour ago, but I'm going to go fill it out.
I feel like we should ask Sam because he's actually on Letterboxd.
Yeah.
It's time to bring in your producer. Sorry, we're taking over this show.
Come on, Sam.
Sam's 4 favourites. Here we go.
Okay, my top 4 favourites are The Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yes.
Legally Blonde 2, Red, White and Blonde.
2? Explain yourself.
It's really good.
I'm adding it to my watch list right now.
Heathers.
Yes.
And Booksmart.
Oh, lovely.
The dream. There we go.
Red, White and Blonde.
I'm going to need to come back to you on that. I can give you one. Network is definitely... I'm not having an argument with myself about that. The rest I'll have to figure out. I also... 3 of those 4 films I'm a big fan of, Sam. But I'll go away and consider that, and I'll let you go back to your day jobs. Thanks so much for coming up here. It's been a super interesting chat, and it's just an extraordinary company you've built.
Can I just make a confession? I look to you a lot for ideas editorially and structurally around what we do, Duncan. You are an absolute king among media queens in Aotearoa.
Oh,
It's a pleasure being on your show.
cut that out, Sam. That was The Fold, brought to you by our partners at O-Media, making brands unmissable and public spaces better across Aotearoa. Huge thanks to O-Media for sponsoring this episode of The Fold and enabling us to make unmissable connections with Kiwis.